In this video, we're going to be making Bubblegum Simulator Infinity in only 30 minutes. I have a timer for 30 minutes. I'm going to start right now. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a script, and this script will basically keep track of the amount of bubbles and coins that the player has. So I'm going to name the script Leader Stats. I'm also going to create a folder in server storage and call it Global Data. And this folder is going to hold the data of all the players in the game. So first I'm going to get the server storage and then get the global data folder we created. I'm going to have a player added event where we will create the leader stats and create a server copy of all the players' stats, which we can replicate to be displayed on the player's side. So we're basically going to create a folder with the player's user ID as the name. We're going to keep track of how much bubbles they've blown, how much coins they've had, and we're going to keep track of the capacity that the player has, the amount of bubbles that they have in their backpack, and then how much bubbles they can blow at once. We're also going to update the player's side of the coins and the total bubbles blown so the players can see their progress in real time. Next, I'm going to create a folder in Workspace, and I'm going to call it Player Bubbles. This will basically hold the bubbles that belong to each player in the game. And now we're going to create our little bubble model. So the bubble is just going to be a regular sphere that's like semi-transparent, and we're going to make it pink because bubblegum is pink. So I'm just going to make it really small to begin with because as they blow bubbles, it will get bigger. And I'm going to insert a string value inside it, and I'm going to call it owner. So basically it'll keep track of whose bubble it actually is. So I'm going to go back into the leader stat script we created, and basically what we're going to do is when the player joins the game, we are going to duplicate the bubble model that we created, and we're going to place it right in front of their face. Next, I'm going to add a remote event, and I'm going to call it update stats event. Whenever one of their stats changes, whether it be the player's coins or the capacity or the amount of bubbles that they have in their backpack, we're going to fire this remote event, which will basically tell the client side to update these stats. And we're basically going to create a GUI which would display these specific stats. So I'm going to create a screen GUI, and this will basically display the player's stats. So we're going to have two text labels. The first one will be to display how much bubbles that they have in their backpack. I'm just going to give it some default text and then add a UI corner and a UI stroke to make it look nicer. I'm going to color the background and make the text slightly bigger. I'm going to change the font and then lastly change the color of the text. So this will display the current amount of bubbles in the player's backpack. I'm going to duplicate this text label, and I'm going to do the same thing, except this text label will display the amount of coins the player has. So I just made the background yellow and then changed the text and the text color. Alright, now I got about 20 minutes left, so we've gone through about 10 minutes of our time already. I'm going to insert a local script inside of this GUI that we've currently created, and I'm going to call it update display. Then I added code that would basically listen for the remote event firing, so the one we just created, the update stats event, and basically update the text based on the player's new stats. So I'm going to go ahead and play test the game. So as you can see, the GUIs are rendered on the left side, and then there are the player's stats on the top right corner. And when we change the player's stats, you can see that it's reflected in the in-game leaderboard. I'm going to insert another remote event, and I'm going to call this blow bubbles. Next, I'm going to go inside of starter player scripts and insert a local script. So this script will be called check if blowing, and we'll basically check if the player has their mouse held down. So here we're setting up a bunch of local variables which will keep track of the cooldown and getting the proper remote events and the user input service. Then we're going to detect if the player is holding down their mouse. And lastly, we want to fire the remote event if they are holding down their mouse, because that means they are blowing bubbles. Next, I'm going to go and insert a script into server script service. And this script will manage the blowing bubbles. So this is kind of a long piece of code, but essentially what it does is that when the remote event fires, we're basically going to increase the size of the bubble. And basically what we're going to do is we're basically going to add a value onto the total amount of bubbles a player has blown, and then add a certain number onto the amount of bubbles currently in the player's backpack. So let's go ahead and test it out. So I'm going to start blowing on the bubbles. As I keep blowing, it gets bigger, but our character kind of moves funny, but I realized that was because we didn't make the bubble massless. So basically, as the bubble got bigger, it got too heavy. So I just turned off that option, so now the bubble has no weight no matter what size it is, and now it works properly. Next, we're going to create the sell location. So the sell location will just be this circular area where the players can walk into to sell their bubbles. I'm going to create the cylinder and then make it yellow. I'm going to give it a neon material and then make it semi-transparent. Next, I'm just going to name the part sell part, just so we don't get confused. And I'm going to add a billboard GUI, which will basically display text telling the players that it's a sell bubble location. Then I'm going to add a script inside, and this script will basically handle the selling of the bubbles in their backpack. So basically what I did was I connected a touched event to the sell part, and then I increased the player's coin value based on how much bubbles were in their backpack. I then reset the amount of bubbles in their backpack and then made the bubble shrink back to its regular size. Next, I'm going to add a remote event, and this remote event will basically tell the client to render the GUIs that we're going to create. So these GUIs will basically display every time you blow a bubble or anytime you gain coins. So it will basically display the amount of coins that you get. So right now I'm just making it so that whenever the player gets bubbles or gets coins, this event gets fired. So basically I'm making sure that this happens when players sell their bubble and when players blow their bubbles, because that's the only two times that the player will gain bubbles or gain coins. Next, I'm going to add a screen GUI, and I'm going to call it Bubble Coins Display. I'm going to add a folder which will basically hold the templates for the bubbles and for the coins. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a frame inside this template folder, and I'm going to call it Bubbles. So this will basically be our template for when players gain bubbles. So I'm going to insert a UI corner inside, and I'm basically going to increase it so that the frame becomes a circle. I'm then going to insert a text label inside, which will basically display the amount of bubbles or coins that they've gained. So I just wrote +10 as default text. And now I'm going to make the frame a little smaller and centralize everything. And I'm going to add a UI stroke to give it a nice outline on the frame. Next, I'm going to make the font a little nicer and then give it a nice background color. And I figured white would be a better color for the text here. So this GUI would appear every time a player blows bubbles. Next, I'm going to duplicate the template I just created and do the same thing except for coins. I'm going to make the background yellow just to differentiate the two, and then I'm going to hide them both. Next, I'm going to insert a local script inside of this GUI, and this local script will basically handle the animation. So this script basically listens for the remote event that we just created to fire. It will create a clone, so it will duplicate one of the templates that we've just created. It'll put it on a random part of the screen, and then it will tween it, so basically animate it so that it shows up on screen, but then it kind of goes up and out of the screen. So let's go ahead and test it out. So I'm going to start blowing some bubbles. As you can see, the GUIs are popping up. So we got the +5 popping up in different places every time we blow a bubble. And then when we go ahead and sell, you can see the +60 and then now the +15 showing up as well. And notice how it's yellow, so you can differentiate the two. And on the left side, you can see the coins amount increasing as well as the bubbles in the backpack increasing and decreasing as you blow bubbles and sell bubbles. Alright, we got 5 minutes left, so I gotta hurry up. I'm going to insert a remote event into replicated storage again. And this remote event I'm going to call Update Gravity. So basically, in Bubble Bubble Simulator, when you blow bubbles, the bigger your bubble, the higher you can jump. So this will basically handle that. So I'm going to add a few lines into some existing code that we had. So I'm going to make sure this remote event fires every time a player blows bubbles and every time a player sells bubbles. Next, I'm going to insert a local script into starter player scripts, and I'm going to call it Gravity. I'm just going to make it so that the client updates the gravity for the player as appropriate. So when their backpack is empty, they're going to have default gravity, and then as their bubble gets bigger, we're going to slowly decrease the gravity so that they can jump higher. Now we need a map, but since I only have 5 minutes left, I'm going to go inside the toolbox and just find some generic random simulator map. So I'm going to go ahead and search simulator map and find the first one that looks good. So this one looks okay, so I'm going to use that one. I'm just going to shift it off to the side, and I'm going to move the spawn location and then the cell location that we've created. Next, I'm going to go inside the toolbox and I'm going to find a coin. So basically, in Bubblegum Simulator, you can collect these coins that are around the map and it'll basically, well, give you coins. So I just found this random generic coin model, which I am going to use. I'm going to delete some of the default scripts inside and I'm going to add my own. So I'm going to add a script and I'm going to call it give player coins. So I wrote some code, and basically what it does is it waits until someone touches the coin, and once it touches the coin, it'll increase the amount of coins the player has by 10, so giving the player 10 coins and then deleting the coin from the game. So I'm going to duplicate it and place a few coins around the map. And I'm just going to turn off the cast shadow property of the coins to make it look better, and we've run out of time just as I was finishing the game. Now let's go ahead and test our version of Bubblegum Simulator Infinity. So I'm playtesting the game and it lets me blow bubbles. And notice my little bubble is getting bigger. Now I can go ahead and collect some of the coins, and as you can see, it gives me 10 coins. Notice the GUI pop-ups. So I get 10 coins and it displays every time I collect some coins. And now I'm going to go ahead and sell some of my bubbles. And as you can see, my bubble deflates, but I get coins in exchange. Now notice with an empty bubble, I can't jump very high at all. So we're going to blow up our bubble really big, and we're going to see if we can jump any higher. So my bubble is getting pretty big, so I think it's time to attempt to jump. As you can see, I'm starting to be able to jump much higher than I normally would. And that's because the bubble is getting bigger, meaning my jump power is increasing and the gravity is decreasing, so I go higher. As you can see, I can jump really high now. But after I sell my bubble, the gravity and the jumping power goes back to normal, so I can't jump as high anymore. So yeah, that's my version of Bubblegum Simulator Infinity made in 30 minutes. If you're looking for a really straightforward way to learn Roblox scripting and Roblox development in general, I highly recommend you check out my course on Udemy. I'll leave links in the description and in the comments below. This course will take you through the complete basics of the Roblox Studio interface and programming on Roblox, with quizzes and notes to reinforce your understanding. Then we'll move to the more advanced concepts where I'll teach you everything you need to become a master scripter. Finally, we're going to put it all together to make your very first Roblox game. By the end of this course, you'll have the skills to bring your ideas to life. Are you ready? Join me today and let's start creating.